Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I am honored to have Todd Anderson with me. Todd is an athlete that's sponsored by a lot of different companies. He owns and is the founder of a company called Synergy Dryland and is currently also running a marathon training company. In addition to that, Division I athlete, played in the NFL, and super honored to have Todd on. And I think one of the biggest takeaways you're going to have from our conversation today is how important grit and perseverance is to get to where you want to go. So, Todd, thanks so much for being on, brother.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. Looking forward to it.
You betcha. So, to kick off your story, let's talk a little bit about getting introduced to sports at a young age. So, talk a little bit about being young Todd and getting the opportunity to start learning and playing football.
Yeah, man. I played everything growing up, but so I was the only child, and my dad was a coach, and so it was always a big deal. Like I was always around football teams. We watched Michigan State. I always was around athletes and loved sports. So
Yeah.
I remember football specifically. There was a town next to me, Michigan Center was the name, and we actually said I was in third grade, but I was in second grade because I was going to be a kid. So yeah, I started playing tackle football in second grade. I was supposed to be third grade. And that was kind of what kicked everything off. But I loved it. I loved a couple of traditions. I love the sport, but like me and my dad had a tradition where every Monday night, like we'd order pizza because it was Monday Night Football. So
Yeah.
that was a huge deal. So every single Monday Night Football, we ordered pizza. I tried to stay awake, and it was also cool because I didn't have a bedtime. So that also influenced my love of football. But yeah, growing up, I wrestled, golf, baseball, hockey. I was a goalie in hockey. What else did I do? I did gymnastics when I was really little. I've done it all. So yeah, kind of a sports junkie.
Yeah. Now, whenever there's a parent that's a coach, I think there's always this extra level of pressure, but there's an extra level of potentially coaching as well, right?
Yeah.
Dad might say, "Hey, I'm going to teach you some extra things." So, talk a little bit about your and your dad's relationship and that dynamic of he's a coach and I want to be good at football, but at the same token, he's dad and I still want to be a
Yeah.
kid.
Yeah. My dad coached me in a lot of stuff, baseball too, wrestling. So it was tough because there's a balance. There's a balance. Like you always want approval of your parents, right?
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes I think I did stuff. Sometimes I would play stuff, and I just felt like I was always playing and whatever. But for the most part, like my parents were so supportive. Obviously we weren't rich by any means. My parents were teachers, but like when it came down to equipment, for Christmas or whatever, like they would do everything they possibly could to just make sure I had the stuff that I wanted. And they felt like, and I would be the same way as a parent. I'm not a parent yet, but like that stuff gets kids excited. And if there's anything you're
Yeah.
going to put money into, I think it's an awesome thing. So, they were like the most supportive, amazing parents that I could ask for. But, it is an interesting dynamic with my dad. Like, yeah, obviously he's coaching, he wants to win, he wants you to do well. And there's always some moments of like frustration and stuff. But, for the most part, I think, it was instilled in me. I think usually like if the effort was there, then he was completely fine with it, right? It's when you didn't put in the effort, or like maybe you weren't like trying that hard, where he'd have a problem with it, which was I totally understand now.
Yeah.
I'm that's the thing. And they didn't ever another rule they didn't have, which I think is was very important, and I think that I'll continue this with my kids, is I was never allowed to quit a sport, right? So I could
Love that.
not playing after the season, but as far as like the commitment to your team and like just seeing it through, like even if I hated it,
Yeah.
I had to finish the season, which I think, there's something to that. I think like being responsible to other people
Yeah.
and, understanding that it's not always about you is important. And I think that really, like you were talking about grit, I think going through some of those moments where it's not maybe something that you want to do, but you realize later on that like a lot of life is like that. And there's a lot of
Yeah.
things that come from pushing through things like that.
I love that. And, I think that's one of the beautiful things about sports. I mean, you could probably say it about other extracurricular activities. I didn't really do anything other than sports, but, it's like you learn a lot of life lessons. And while you're
Yeah.
learning them, you don't realize they're life lessons. And then you get in a
Yeah.
professional situation, you get in a relationship, and you're like, oh shit, I've lived this,
Yeah,
experience before.
100%.
It was just in basketball or it was in football, right? And now I can
Right.
apply it to where I'm at.
Yeah. And my dad and both my parents did an amazing job where, and I think a lot of parents struggle with this, where they didn't push me to play sports, but they would always offer like, do you want to play this? Do you, like
Yeah.
to know that I was like, it was an option. And I
Yeah.
usually said, yeah. And then there became a point where like my dad transitioned from like coach to more of a like supportive dad when I became the driver. And I think parents have to let their kids do this. Like when I, got to be about 16, like I started wanting to lift before school. I started wanting to go hit extra batting practice, to do extra stuff. And they were
Yeah.
just supportive. My dad would go throw batting practice to me like on Sundays if I asked him. And or they kind of switched roles from like, you know, more being in the driver's seat or at least like guiding my path to like, okay, like, if you're going to be an elite athlete, it has to be on you. And they kind
Yeah.
of provided the resources and let me guide the way. And same with my wife. My wife is an Olympian, and her parents, same thing. Like, we were driving our success and our training, and they were providing the resources and the support. But, you really can't force your kids to be great. Like they have to want to be great on their own.
Well, and that's the interesting thing. You look at some of the parents and, for me, I'm a big basketball guy. I played in college and I think of like Pistol Pete, right? So his
Right.
dad's the head coach at LSU. Pistol Pete goes and plays for him, sets the record for most points average per game. But he always talked about how much he hated his dad because his dad would force
Yeah.
him to go do
Right.
things. And
Right.
you sit there and you go, as his dad, you're like, well, you just knew what he was capable of. So you were going to push him to reach his potential. But to your point, there is that element of like, at some point, though, it's better if I want to be the one that's owning it, opposed to my parents pushing me.
Right.
They're more encouraging rather than pushing me to do something I don't want to do.
Right. Because that's going to run out, like that
Yeah.
intrinsic motivation, like has no stopping. And I think, you see that along with all the elite athletes is like, you're never going to get a guy that's pushed into doing something elite, right? That's just not going to happen. So there's no sense in thinking that's going to happen at any level. Even if they're 7 years old, you're not going to force them to care. So you just got to figure out what it is they do want to do. And I think just, like I said, you can kind of provide those bumpers, but for the most part, just be a support system.
That's really good. Now, you start having some success at a very early age. I mean, you end up being a three-time all-conference linebacker in high school, which, that's pretty darn good. Now,
Yeah.
when we think about that, though, I think there's different progressions of, us as an athlete, right? It's, you remember that first time you get the start and that was a big deal. And then you remember the first time that you're the player of the game. And then all of a sudden, it starts growing from there. But at what point in your high school, career did you start recognizing that, hey, I'm going to have an opportunity to play at the highest level, in college?
Yeah. Probably the day I showed up at college is honestly the probably the part.
Yeah.
But so man, I had a massive chip on my shoulder all through high school. Like, so my dad was a coach when I was a freshman, right? And me and
Yeah.
my best friend was ended up being the quarterback for 3 years. I would say that we were definitely like the best kids in our grade. And
Yeah.
so at the end of our freshman year, we got brought up to varsity, which was rare for a freshman to be brought up for varsity.
You bet.
And we were in a playoff game, and we were just getting blown out at the end of the game. And so they put in the entire JV offense for the last drive because we weren't going to win. And we ended up scoring a touchdown. But regardless, there was a huge uproar with parents because they thought that we were being favored and all this stuff. And there's a whole bunch of stuff coming out. So like, people going to school board talking, and I could tell you these people's names. I think about them more than they ever will realize. But there was a lot of things that went on. There's a lot of things that went on. And I had a chip on my shoulder from that day forward. Like, I'm going to prove these people wrong. Like I deserve to be there. I deserve these opportunities. It has nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
And so I started lifting with seniors. I would literally come in before baseball practice in the morning in the weight room. Like my dad had a key, I'm doing the lock to unlock the school, and which is probably this huge liability, but, and I was lifting on my own and stuff and, just doing everything wrong. And I just felt like I had this mentality to prove again to these people that like I deserved it. And it's funny because the same people that were going to the school board, writing letters, saying we didn't deserve it. Like they didn't see all that stuff being done. Like they didn't see
Right.
all the work. And funny enough, when I ended up going to Michigan State and getting an opportunity in the NFL, those were the same people writing me cards saying, we were there for you, rooted for you the whole time. Like we knew you could do it, all this pat on the back. And, I knew deep down, who's supporting you, who's in your corner. And so when you're
Yeah.
trying to do something that's out of the ordinary, it's usually a select few that's in your corner.
Absolutely. Now, I want to highlight that because, you're using it in an instance of sports, and there's a lot of people listening that maybe they didn't go on to play collegiate sports, but maybe they're in a business now and they had people that, didn't support them for year one or year two, but now they've made it 5 years and they're starting to get the support from folks. And I think there's this interesting dynamic of it's good to have a little extra, chip on your shoulder as rocket fuel for a while. But if you hold
Yeah,
on to that too long to prove people wrong, it almost ends up starting to hold you back at some point because you're limiting your belief to like, oh, well, they didn't think I could do this. Well, now that I did it, I've proven them wrong. And it's like, yeah, but Todd, you're capable of so much more. So talk a little bit about that for you, that dynamic of chip on the shoulder is good motivation, but at some point it may be time to like cut the baggage because you're missing out on your true
100%.
potential.
100%. I was literally having this exact conversation with Ken Rideout, my friend earlier today, whose office I'm in. And it's such a battle because on one side, that chip on your shoulder, never being satisfied mentality is a driver. I mean, it's
Yeah.
powerful,
Yeah.
but it's also can drive you into the ground, right?
Right.
It can limit your potential. So I think having a chip on your shoulder is useful in the right situations, and I think that it helps you get through certain barriers, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I think once you break through a certain barrier and you have to realize that like you're never going to prove everybody wrong. There's always going to be doubt, but I
Yep.
think it can be useful for certain tasks or achievements. And I think that's kind of what you have to realize is like, okay, they doubted me for this thing. I'm going to go attack it, accomplish it, and move on, and understand that momentum is powerful, and people are going to jump on the bandwagon. And yeah, you do have to be able to let that go. But I think usually when you're achieving high levels of success, like you naturally have to grow and evolve. So I think for me, I think some of that maturity and I guess understanding, how those dynamics work with people supporting you and these different social dynamics. I think that I kind of matured along with the ride. So um, I was able to not let that kind of hold me back. I still battle that stuff every day. I on a day to day, you're like, am I doing enough? Like, am I reaching my potential? I mean, I think about that, 5 times a day. And
Yeah.
so it's always a battle. But on the flip side, if those people came up and said something to me now, I don't think I'd be pumped to talk to them still.
Yes. Nope. That's perfect, man. So
Yeah.
we're progressing through high school. Once again, you have a great high school career and the opportunity comes to head to college. Now, the interesting dynamic is, you get the opportunity to walk on at Michigan State, but anyone that's going to be a walk on at that elite of a caliber school probably also has the opportunity to go play with a significant scholarship at Division 2 or, NAI or, Division 3 if you get academics, things like that. So my guess is the love of the Spartans is what said, hey, I want to go walk on here and not take a different offer at something that's maybe a little bit
Yeah.
smaller. But talk a little bit about that and making that decision for you.
Yeah. So, well, you'd think that I'd have other offers, but I did not have one Division 2 offer
Get
coming
out of
out of
here.
not one. So, you talk about the moments of the podcast that like
Yeah.
who would have known when, and this is probably a massive one in my life. It's probably the most impactful moment. There's two. There's probably the most impactful moment though, as far as the trajectory of my life has went. And so I was overweight growing up through. I mean, I was a little overweight the whole way. So I played line, and then my senior year, I got in really good shape. I dropped a bunch of weight. I was lifting super hard. I was in great shape. I was like 220 pounds and pretty lean and like,
Yeah.
big high school kid. And so that being like, you get recruited early in high school. So I was on the
Right.
radar. I'm in a small school, but we have the biggest high school in Michigan, Jackson High, is right up the road, and they're way bigger than us. So we didn't play them, but we were playing 7-on-7.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And so I would say I was pretty athletic, but I played line the whole time, so I never caught the ball or anything like that. But I could catch well, I could move well. I played all these other sports. So that day, our tight end, we didn't have any tight ends show up for 7-on-7. I just went to snap the ball as a center because I'm a lineman.
Yeah.
So they're like, hey, Todd, let's play tight end. And we were playing Jackson High, who's had massive recruits. They had 5-star recruits, big time recruits. And I caught like 8 passive. I was making like one-handed catches and just kind of had a day.
Yeah.
Now, Jackson High's head coach is watching, and he's just like kind of blown away at how well I did. Fast forward to the spring of my senior year, I still have no Division II offers. I thought I was getting offered by Hillsdale College, which, in retrospect, I ended up when I signed a free agent deal with the Rams. I spoke at a camp, and the coach that didn't offer me at Hillsdale was there, and I just made sure to like point that out. But, yeah, but so fast forward to the spring, Michigan State has some preferred walk-on spots open. They go to Jackson High, it's the biggest school in Michigan, and they're like, hey, yeah, do you have anybody for us? And that coach ended up saying, I don't have anyone great, but if there's anybody you should go talk to, it's Todd Anderson in Napoleon High School.
Wow.
So I get called down to the office, and I'm pumped that there's a Division III school there to talk to me. I've been a Michigan State fan my whole life. My dad went there. My dad used to help send out recruiting letters for the football team, worked in the football office. And all of a sudden I walk down and I get there, and the guy has it's Don Treadwell, who's offensive coordinator, has a Michigan State coming on his shirt. And I was like, wait, are you here to see? I was legitimately confused. Then like he starts talking about preferred walk-on spot to walk-ons and all this stuff. And then, a couple months later, I was, Coach D'Antonio gave me a call, and he was like, if you want to try to walk on, we have a spot in camp. And I remember having a Venn diagram. My mom was a second grade, she's an elementary principal, but we got like a pros and cons list of like going to this Division III school, Adrian College and Michigan State. And, the one thing I kept leaning back on was like, am I going to regret not trying if I don't do it? So, so I kind of pulled the trigger, and that was that. But if I hadn't showed up at that 7-on-7, and just got some extra work in, like we didn't even need a lineman there, right? So like I came just to be supportive of the team. If I didn't show up from that, who knows what would have happened?
Man, that's crazy. I love it. So you do end up going to Michigan State, and once again, that's a phenomenal program. You're there during some great years. I would love to just say, hey, from the get-go, it was just like Todd got thrown into the mix and he was the starting guy, but literally sophomore year, you have a knee injury. And once again, you're trying to get an opportunity as a walk-on, and you have an injury. So just talk a little bit about like the emotional state of that, because there's plenty of people that would just say, all right, forget it. I'm walking on, I'm injured, like whatever, let's just be done. So talk a little bit about it.
Yeah. So, I mean, I actually had 2 injuries people don't really know about. Well, first off, when I got there, I mean, I was not good. Like I was so far out of my element. I was just like the slowest, the weakest, I was just, I'm from a small school, so I think I even understood the game well. Like I didn't really have a strength at all.
Yeah.
And so my first semester was a massive learning, growing experience. Like waking up early, classes, everything just hit me right in the face. Cultural shock, from a small school in Michigan, all different types of people, like just, it was everything thrown in a mixed bag. And it was super hard. It was the hardest thing I ever did. That first semester, that first football camp, I mean, was by far the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. The 4th day, I called my parents and I was like, I don't know if I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I can do this. But then fast forward, so that was my redshirt freshman year. So my redshirt my freshman year. The next year, I started to get a lot of confidence. I put in a ton of work in the offseason and weight room, all that stuff. And I'm like, I think I can do this. I can play. I got moved to DN. Summer conditioning last week, I strained my quad, like no big deal. And so I was going to take like 2 weeks off right before camp.
Yeah.
Week before camp, get out of the shower and slip in like a hurdle stretch. And I just like tore my quad. So I have a giant ball in my quad, like a full tear of my rectus femoris. There's a giant bulge still there to this day. So I remember coming into camp and being like, the first day I'm like, my quad is like messed up, but I didn't tell anybody. And because I'm a walkout, I'm trying to get an opportunity, right? I remember
Right.
Coach Antonio. Yeah. Coach Antonio walking up to me and he's like, we're gonna give you a shot, like to basically like start and play and get a scholarship. In football, it's full ride or nothing.
Yep.
So I show up, and the first thing we have in camp is our conditioning test, and it's 20 half gassers, which is across the field and back, 100-yard sprint basically. And I'm like, I got to try to do it. So, your rectus femoris is like, it's the only quad that crosses your knee and your hip. So if you, flex your hip a little bit, it alleviates some of the tightness. So I literally like ran these sprints like slightly bent over. People couldn't really tell. And I ran all 20. And the next day I woke up and my leg was literally black and blue from like my
Oh my
hip to my
gosh.
ankle. It was crazy. I've never seen anything. The bruising was insane. So, I mean, I was pretty much out for that whole season. I was out for like 8 weeks. And by the time I came back, I was not ready to play.
Yeah.
Next year, doing well, second string, probably on pace to get a scholarship, like seventh day of camp, cut and just tear cartilage on my femur, like in my knee. Had to have
Oh
knee
my
surgery,
gosh.
out for the whole season. And then, going back to high school, like in the back of my mind, I know all these people are sitting there like, oh, he's just a walk on, he's not going to play.
Yeah.
This is my third year now. And I'm like, I swear I'm good enough to play here. Like I can do this,
Right.
but like,
Yeah.
I'm good. And then, I remember like my knee just like did not get better. And then it was like 2 weeks before spring ball, still wasn't better. I had surgery in August or maybe early September, still wasn't better. And I remember Kirk Cousins, our quarterback, I was like, Kirk, I don't know. Like, I don't know if I can play. Like, I think I might be done. And I started thinking about like, I was always into strength conditioning. Do I become a strength GA? Like, what do I do? And I was pretty much giving up on my goals. And I decided to give it a go. So I'm like, I'm gonna
Yeah.
try to do spring ball. Still playing at the end. First practice, I come and I hit someone, and I kind of like hit him where like my leg is straight, so kind of all the force goes through my knee, and it just goes like whack, and like pops, and I was like, oh man, like this is not good. Like
You're
I
not
don't know what's going on. I had no idea what happened, but it was like okay, and like what it hurt, but like not bad. It was weird. And the next day I woke up and we had a lift, and I started to warm up, and like all the pain was gone. Like they think it like broke up scar tissue. I have no idea what happened, but I felt like completely fine. And so like I was able to come back that fall. I started on like a third down package at the end. I got a scholarship. Yeah, things kind of just unfolded from there. So I played the end. I played pretty well, but fullback was definitely like my best position. They switched
Yeah.
me over. Then I became, I went from just switching to fullback, and then by the end of third game of the season, Drew Worthy, who was like a first round, prospect, he's like, yeah, the scouts keep asking me about you. I'm like, that wasn't even like in my stratosphere. I was like, I don't even know how that even works. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So as the season went on, I got more and more exposure, and then I ended up getting an opportunity. So
Yeah.
it
So
was pretty wild.
So here's kind of the two dynamics I think are super interesting. And once again, I want whoever's listening to this right now to kind of think about it, not in a football sense, but understand Todd's story and understanding your life. And that is you've been working your tail off to play on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
And now senior year, you've been putting in all this work and they say, let's maybe flip you over to offense. It's like, bro, I've been working on this for years. Like, why now are you moving me? Like, I'm finally getting in my groove here, and you're gonna switch me
Yeah.
over there. And so someone listening right now is like, dude, I've been working my tail off to get this opportunity, but they're not getting the opportunity, but maybe some other door is opening. The flip
Yeah.
side way to think about it, and maybe this is where your head goes is, well, things haven't been going the way I want them to go on defense. Hell, might as well give it a shot on offense. I mean, it's not like I'm, getting demoted from starting D end to, third string D end, and now I'm gonna move to offense. It's like, well, it hasn't quite gone the way I wanted to on defense. Maybe offense will work out better and give me more opportunity. So talk a little bit about that from like a mental standpoint for you.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was mentally interesting. So I actually, my roommate was also a fullback,
Of
which
course.
is, junior. So they moved me over, and that was, it was what it was. I mean, our coaches were so fair, and like, whoever was better was going to play. So it wasn't.
Yeah.
I don't think that caused a lot of issues, and we were like best friends. So, um, but it was tough. But I mean, honestly, like Coach D'Antonio, like he called me in his office, and he was just like, next year, like we want the best 11 guys on the field at a time. And I think this is the best way to do that. Like you're one of those guys, but we got to figure out how to get you on the field. So they kind of trialed me during bowl prep the year prior, and it was such a natural fit. I like loved it. I loved the aggression. I loved everything about it. I'd rather be the hammer than the nail. Like
Yeah.
defense is reactive, and it just fit me better. So I was excited for the opportunity. I fully embraced the switch, and it just seemed like the perfect fit. As soon as I switched over, I was like, "Oh, I should have been doing this the entire time."
Yeah. Well, and so you're playing on a great team, good offense. I mean, Kirk Cousins quarterback, Le'Veon Bell's in the backfield with you. I mean, it's not like you're, back there with any scrubs. So just talk a little bit about, the leadership on a team and really, what it takes to bring a team with good individuals together to be a cohesive unit of 11.
Yeah. Looking back, I think that you don't realize what you have in the moment, right? When we look back, someone like Kirk or Le'Veon, like those are just normal guys, and
Yeah.
we all kind of have that blue collar mentality. I mean, Coach D'Antonio, um, we used to do stuff just to like keep us grounded. We got all these new facilities. He'd make us go and run the last day in the snow because they didn't used to have facilities. We would wear like button up like Dickies like work shirts the first day of camp. We do a lot of stuff to kind of like make sure we remember where we came from. But as far as leadership goes, I mean, Coach D'Antonio set such a great foundation. He cared so much about the people, right?
Mm,
Like, he
yeah.
was about the person before the football player. And we talked about, being spiritual, family, all these things. He had this, it was like, this called a winner's manual. And every day in camp, we go through these different, life lessons and stuff. And some of it when you're a kid, it's kind of corny, but looking back, like everything he was trying to instill with us is like these super deep levels of leadership. We would read leadership books together as a team.
Yeah.
And then like, it just kind of flowed from there. Like he set the groundwork, and then you get a guy like Kirk Cousins, who's people like don't understand because they don't see him inside the locker room, but he is a world-class leader. I mean, the guy would remember everything about everyone on the team. He would check in with you. He's just a genuine, like amazing person, and just
Yeah.
like he's also like a ferocious competitor.
Yeah.
He's what you see in the media isn't necessarily a good portrayal of how competitive the guy is. Like he will go to lengths to win. He wants to win more than anybody else out there. He might not say it like everybody else,
Right.
but his actions behind the closed doors, which he's not going to advertise, he's next level when it comes down to being a competitor. So I think we were super blessed, but again, we felt like we had something to prove, and we had that chip in a good way. And I think being a walk on, like Coach Antonio always said, like earned, never given. And that's kind of been like my mentality. And I think that was that team's mentality. Like, but being a walk on, you felt like you almost had to prove every day, like why they should keep me. And I think
Yeah.
that, people talk about imposter syndrome, and obviously is like a negative connotation. But I think in some sense, I definitely had imposter syndrome when I showed up. Like I didn't think I belonged there.
Mm,
But I think that was a positive thing, because even when I was good enough to play, I felt like I needed to prove every day why I was good enough. Like you couldn't
yeah.
take a day off. Like you had to every day. It was almost like earning your keep. Like every day,
Yeah.
put the work in. Just make them continue to believe that you deserve to be there. And I think that I've taken that with me well past football. And I guess when I think about imposter syndrome, I think that like yes, you need to believe in yourself, but at the same point, like you shouldn't be entitled to things, right? You should believe you can accomplish things, and believe you deserve a place at the table. But once you get to the table, you need to earn that spot and continue to earn it, not just sit back and be like, I'm here, I deserve to be here. So I think there's a lot, man, when we're looking at some of the some of the stuff that's developing now with the workforce and athletes, all that stuff, there's a lot of entitlement, and a lot of stuff we're doing is feeding into that. So I think when people feel like they need to prove themselves, it makes things run a lot more smooth, or at least society will benefit from it as a whole, I think.
Yeah. Well, and once again, I want to highlight your story today, so I don't want to derail our conversation. But I told a friend of mine, I go, I love the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo said, I don't want to be traded. I want to stick with the Niners. Hey, you drafted Trey Lance. He's going to come in, and you know what? I understand that you probably have to give him the keys to the, car. Like you spend a top pick on him. But like, I'm going to stay here because what if something happens? I might get my shot. Now, granted, he just got injured, but like he did get his opportunity. And in today's world of the transfer portal, it's like, oh, well, if you're just going to go start that guy, then whatever, I'll find somewhere else to go. And
like 2,500 kids in there. I'm like,
yeah, I mean, and you just go, where's that sense of like competitiveness? It's like, no, I don't want you to just take my job and I'm going to go pack my bags. It's like, no, I want to earn that spot back from you. Like I'm a competitor. And so, yeah.
And the loyalty side, I'm just like, we were loyal to Michigan State. Like we would have done anything for that place. And, we'll see what happens, but the portals and stuff, it definitely puts that in question.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So as the college career progresses, once again, we kind of just went through it all. You now have solidified yourself as a key player on a great team, and you're being very impactful, and that opens up the door to what the NFL has to offer. Now, once again, we're talking about football in the 2000s. Fullback is not a spot that a lot of teams are heavily utilizing. It's not earlier years, and yet there's still an opportunity for you. So talk a little bit about how the NFL kind of comes to be and some of the tryouts and opportunities you have there.
Yeah. So, I mean, so after the season, I signed with an agent and ended up going to Naples, Florida, to train.
Yeah.
Which is where I met my wife. She had the same strength and conditioning coach.
Thank God you went there.
Oh yeah. Well, I have another one of those moments coming up. So, we met and we kind of stayed in touch, and she had a tough go at 2012 Olympic trials and kind of, in the summer, and kind of brought us closer, but ended up doing really well at pro day and ended up signing. I mean, fullbacks didn't really get drafted just because the state of the game, but signing with the Rams, had a couple opportunities, the Ravens, the Chargers, but that seemed to be the best opportunity as far as, me getting a spot. But it's crazy, and this is kind of how my NFL career ended, which is one of those moments that you're like, a huge impact, and at the time it was probably the worst thing ever, but ended up being probably the best thing ever. Is I actually failed a drug test in the NFL, and I haven't told the story too many times, but so basically what happened is it was a summer, we had a month off, and we were going to my buddy Adam's lake house, and we were just going to hang out on the lake for a couple of days and all this stuff. And we had been out the night before, we were up late, and we had to drive like 2.5 hours, and I was super tired. And I remember waking up and be like, oh, I'm so dead. And we had like Oxy Elite Pro fat burners, like a sample on our thing, because we went to the Arnold Classic. It was on our counter. And I was like, I know they say like there's like, banned stimulants in here, but I'm like dying, and like I have a month off, it's no big deal.
Right.
So we start driving, hour up. I get a call from the NFL, and they're like, you have a drug test. So I immediately like pull over, and I like try to throw up.
Yeah, right.
Water. What's crazy about this story is the NFL had the wrong number. So my number ends with 4504, and they had 4505. So they called this number. This random person happened to know my parents. Who connected them with my parents, who connected them with me, and I ended up getting the call. So I mean, it was meant to be. Like, you know what I mean? But if they had the wrong number, like it would have just went as like you get like there's like 3 things where like wrong information and it doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So I take this drug test, and I ended up. It takes a long time for the process to go through, because they do one sample and another sample. It takes months for this process to go through. And, I'm just like kind of freaking out because I don't know the results, and it was horrible. And so camp comes around, and I'm doing pretty well on camp, and I I tweaked my hamstring out a little bit. So every day I'm just wondering what's going on. Ended up playing pretty well, and I probably would have, was like a practice squad guy for sure. I wasn't developed enough to like I didn't run routes and like carry the ball at Michigan State. So I definitely had a lot of development to do there, but my size and my blocking, all the stuff, they really liked me, and they were going to pick me up on practice squad. And so basically the last day of cuts, I get a letter in my locker that I failed this drug test, and they no, so wait, I get the letter first day of camp. I failed the drug test, but they have to test the second one. So the coaches have no idea at this point still.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, feel like I'm living a lie and walking around. I'm like, this is horrible. I'm trying to compete and I'm doing well. They call me in the office. They're going to release me, which is totally normal for a practice squad guy. They're like, and Coach Fisher told me, there's a lot of people that shouldn't play in this league. You're definitely not one of them. Some people I tell that this is going to be a tough sled, but we want to bring you back for a practice squad spot. We're going to release you today. We'll give you a call in a couple of days and we'll figure things out.
Yeah.
Perfect. Later that day, maybe the next day, the coaches were notified, and I had a 4-game suspension, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
And nowadays it would have been just a warning, because so back then every single drug was considered, it was all under one big blanket. 4-game suspension, performance enhancing drug. So now, like certain stimulants and stuff that's over the counter, it's not a big deal. It's not like it would have helped me in any way in the off season, right? Yep. So when I'm like, everyone's going to think I was taking something crazy, when it was like this stupid like energy thing. And then 4-game suspension. So basically, that was the end of the opportunity. And so I had an opportunity, and like after these 4 games was over, like, do I try to keep doing this free agent life, bounce around, and I had met Katie. We ended up moving in together very quickly. And, I decided, like, I accomplished a lot. My body was banged up, knee surgery, my quad, everything, hamstring. And I just like, I valued, and I saw where it was going with Katie, and bouncing around that free agency market is just tough. So it kind of just felt like the right thing to do. And that was, super impactful, very difficult to deal with, but it's kind of crazy how it all turned out.
Yeah. Now, I've had different guys that have played in the league on the show. And, I think one of the toughest transitions is I've put so much of my life into getting to this point, and there's so much of my identity that's tied to the football aspect and the accolades I've, been able to receive from playing football. And now that whole piece of my life, like, it happened, but it's not who I am moving forward. So talk a little bit about that for you, kind of going through that transition of, I'm Todd Anderson still, and I did play football, but I'm not going to be Todd Anderson, the football player, moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I still fully have gotten through it. There's still parts of you that are so intertwined in that. But the cool thing for me was I love strength conditioning.
Yeah.
So even in college, that's what I wanted to go into. I thought I wanted to be a college strength conditioning coach, and I ended up, basically interning with the place I trained for the pro day. So like when I was going through pro day training, like basically combine training, I was taking it all in, learning, like trying to like take it. So in some ways, I think that helped the transition, because yes, they're not the same thing, but they correspond with each other. Right.
Yeah.
That helped the transition, but it really was probably like, honestly, 5 years later, when I, like maybe 2016, where I really like kind of hit me hard. Like, what am I doing? What is my identity? Kind of like, you start thinking about those things, and fast forwarding, 10, 15 years from now, what's going to be, what am I going to be remembered for? And I think, I think that it's hard, because you'll never match running out in front of 100,000 people, right? Like that feeling is untouchable. And I think people like seek that, right? Like they try to match those highs. And then once you realize that's not going to happen, it can be depressing. But I think it's more about like what, like as far as fulfillment goes, like what are some big things where maybe it's not the moment of 100,000 people, but if you start a company, you build something and you sell it, or you start a product or something like that, like what's something of that exponential scale that's extraordinary that people look up to, that you feel accomplished with? And like, how do you like set your sights on some of these different things that are going to give you that same sense of accomplishment? And that's not easy to do. And I think it takes a lot of learning and a lot of working through, maybe some therapists involved. That eventually I think people will get there, but you have to be proactive, I think, in understanding what you're going through. And some people just, they don't really get to that proactive point.
That's really good. I love that. Now, so once again, you're personal training and you get to, I mean, I'm sure you have some connections having been at Michigan State, but you get to train quite a few, top level people, MLB, NFL, NBA type players. So talk a little bit about how you get integrated in that community. Once again, I'm sure there might be some connections from Michigan State that parlayed into that, but.
For sure. I mean, I started, working at the place where I trained for the combine or pro day. So obviously there's some NFL guys there. And then I started working with Katie, who was training for the 2016 Olympics, which is going to do a comeback. And so it kind of all snowballed. I was working out of South Beach, and I trained Diddy a couple of times, and Frank Ocean and some of these people. So momentum's powerful. And I think you start working with some of these people, and as I became more and more educated, especially now, I think that I didn't get to build a lot of credibility, especially to work with some of those people. So, I tried to keep, I was always adamant about education. I would try to keep learning and keep myself on the cutting edge. And I think you get to a point where you work with enough people where then all of a sudden, like, they're seeking you out, and there's certain specialties you have. Like, I love the sleep regeneration side of things. So I get a lot of people that seek me out on that side for some of the bigger athletes and some pro guys. So, it's a hard process. So I think, we've lived in a ton of different places: South Beach, Chicago, New York, now Detroit, probably moving to Nashville soon. I think also just meeting like great people. We've been super fortunate in our network and the types of people we've been around. I've been super impactful, like Ken Ryan, who I'm with, like, Jesse Itzler, like, Sarah Blakely. Those are the type of people that it's inspirational to become friends and be around them, and just understand how they go about things, and seeing how people reach such a high successful in these different levels, and yet are so grounded and understand it. Like, it's really inspirational to say, like, wow, you can start $1 billion company and also be an amazing parent and be grounded and, like, do all these things. Like, honestly, for the most part, you don't think that's even possible. Like, right. But it's really cool to see.
Yes. So as you're progressing through, in 2020, you guys decide to start this company, Synergy Dryland. So talk a little bit about what the catalyst was and what the business is that you guys are growing.
Yeah. So, when COVID hit, we were in New York City, and, the swimming community it was a huge hit for people, because like there's no way to not be in a pool, right? When like, there's really nothing like any other sport, like even like basketball, like you could just go run. That somewhat translates to basketball.
Absolutely.
There's a ton of stuff. Swimming is probably the only one that really, like, there's like not a ton you can do.
Yeah.
And so Katie just started hosting these webinars for, like, hey, any swimmers, I'm gonna sweat it out with you. We're gonna do some workouts. I'd help her write the workouts, and she'd get like a couple thousand swimmers on there, and they would just, like, she'd have guests. She had Katie Ledecky on there, like all these, like, all these big time swimmers.
Yeah.
And we just kept getting more and more requests for like help with dryland, which is like swimmers call just strength conditioning dryland. It's just a weird term. I don't know why they call it that, but so. And then when you start to dive into the swimming strength conditioning side, it's there's not a ton of resources in swimming as far as like technology and just like money and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And also it's kind of an old school mentality, because a lot of the swim coaches are responsible for the strength conditioning side, which is insane. Like, imagine like a basketball coach having to be a strength conditioning coach, or a football coach. Like, that's not fair to anybody.
Right.
So we're like, we're kind of like, there's clearly an opportunity here. We're getting a lot of questions. So, we kind of try to like outsource the strength conditioning program for the head coach. So we come in, we have force plates, we do range of motion testing, performance testing, all this stuff. And we kind of create this elaborate strength conditioning program for the swim team, take it off the coach's plate, and we have an app and all this stuff, and kind of outsource it. So like, we're trying to provide the most innovative state-of-the-art programming. So when these kids go from a club team or whatever, high school, they walk into a Division I program and they just hit the ground running. And
Yeah.
there's a big gap there. And it's kind of cool because COVID thrust forward like people's abilities, I think, to like virtually manage that. Like if we would have said this in 2019, hey, we're going to be your strength and conditioning coaches from afar, like people would be like, how is that even possible? But I think COVID realized like, oh, like there's a lot we can do. And then I think, technology allows you to have amazing resources at your fingertips because you don't have to be local, right? The chances that you're local close to a team, you get to work together are so slim. So, I think our reach has been a lot further, and it's been cool to kind of work with all these different teams throughout the country.
I love it. Now, specifically to you, once again, you've had some partnerships, C4, things like that. I mean, the proof is in the pudding, brother. Like I would sign up to train with you because you're in great shape, So talk a little bit about that for you, just wanting to stay in shape. I mean, you and I played basketball in college, you played football in college. We both had teammates that went the opposite way, right?
Oh yeah.
kept eating the same way and they stopped working out, and all of a sudden it's like, dang, bro, what happened? Talk about for you, wanting to stay in shape, but also, hey, I'm going to be a walking billboard for why you should work with me, right? Because of, hey, this is the physical way that I'm able to look.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been through my battles for sure. I mean, I gained some weight after I played. I think learning how to eat and have a good relationship with food after football is so hard because I'm just like trying to gain weight all the time. And, you're working out constantly and just shoveling food, but like the hunger level doesn't go away. You know what I mean? Like that's there. So I really had to learn my way. I gained a bunch of weight, went through some tough times, just, like some of that transition stuff. Sometimes where I wasn't motivated and I wasn't myself and had to work through that. And then, being in the industry, you realize like not only like obviously aesthetically is motivating, but when you're at a healthy weight and you're active, all this stuff, you're functioning at a mental level is such a you're just firing on all cylinders. So a lot of times guys, you don't realize you're going in a bad direction until it's usually too late, or you see a picture or somebody says something, right? And I've gotten there, but I think setting goals, you have to find stuff that's meaningful, and you have to find things that inspire you and be around people that inspire you. So like that for me, like I had this new goal of sign up for the national marathon, which is totally out of my wheelhouse. Like not even anything I'd ever think I would do. So I'm going to try to wake up before I'm going to bench 405 and then deadlift 605, which is also a stretch. Those are tough benchmarks for me, like especially losing some weight. So none of it's a lock. So it'll be an interesting process. But I got inspired because I went on a trip with Jesse. So he has a place in Rome, Georgia. My friend Devin, Jimmy, who's the CEO of Super Coffee, and Tim, who's all these like endurance athletes, Chad Wright, who's an endurance athlete, who's a Navy SEAL. So I remember sitting there, like I'm probably 260, but like I'm strong, like I can lift whatever. And we're sitting there the first day, and they're like, "You guys want to do a triathlon in the morning for fun?" And I was like, "This is not." I'm like to Jeff, I'm like, "You told me we're gonna do sauna, we're gonna have a chef, there's gonna be a sweet trip, there's gonna be a boys trip. This is not what I'm talking about." So we end up just doing all this endurance stuff, and I'm like, I told Jesse, I'm like, dude, if I'm gonna be friends with you, like clearly I need to weigh like 200 pounds because everything we do is all this endurance stuff. And so, but honestly, I was joking, but like I don't want to be put in that situation again. Like I want to be the guy that kind of like gets thrown in anything, at least hang a little bit, right? So that kind of started me to get even better shape of recently and dial things in. And then me and Ken Rideout, he's the fastest marathoner over 50, he's a savage. We started this training company together, and they were still finalizing. We're launching beginning of February, but watching him and just the running community, I just felt like it's something I need to do once in my life, and it's a good challenge. And I found mentally running is man, it's great. It tests you in ways that people don't like to be tested, where it's like sustained discomfort, right? Like I think probably in basketball it's similar, but in football, like you basically did stuff where you just killed yourself till you couldn't, and then you recovered and you did it again. Well, running's like this, like kind of sucks, but I'm just going to be here for the next like couple hours,
Yeah.
and really like thinking about that, you're like, oh, this is not fun. But I think life's kind of like that, like sometimes things suck. Like you start a company and you're going to sell it in 10 years, but it's uncomfortable and it's hard to mentally like be like, oh, this is how it's going to be for a minute. This
Yeah.
is it. So I think it's been good. It's been a lot of mental exploration, a lot of being with your own thoughts, and I won't say I look forward to the next months of training, but I think a lot of good will come from it.
Yeah. Well, and I want to pick into one of the things that you just mentioned, and that was, you start hanging out with people that are in a different sphere of where you're at from some career success. And I think it's so interesting, depending on your personality. If you do that, all of a sudden your eyes are open to what's possible, right? Because oftentimes what happens is we stay in our same circles, and maybe we become the big fish in our circle, and that becomes a ceiling to where we get to. Whereas all of a sudden you're with, Jesse, like you said, you're with Chad, and it's like, dude, these guys are big deals with whoever you're with, not just in my group of 100 people. It's like, no,
Yeah,
across the world, these are big deals. And all of a sudden
yeah.
I see them doing it. It's like, oh, dang, this opens my mind to, well, what else is possible for me? So talk about being able to let your ego down to say what's possible.
Yeah, I mean, I think if there was a mantra for my entire life, it'd be like putting yourself in the right circles. Like I think me going to Michigan State was a classic example. Like I threw myself in there. You will adapt. Like I had
Yeah.
no business being there. I promise you, I was probably the worst player on that team my first year. I was so bad. But like you're adaptable and you throw
Yeah.
yourself in the ring and like you're gonna figure it out one way or the other. And I think that doesn't stop with sports. I think you throw yourself in the circle career wise, business wise, like you're gonna figure it out. Like you're smart, like you're very capable. And I think when you're eventually you get around people that have done some of the stuff that you want to do and you're inspired by, you realize like the only difference between the extremely successful and the normal person is the normal person has good ideas and they talk about things and they want to be great. The extremely successful person, they have an idea and they just do it. They're like, okay, let's go, and they go and they do it, and it's crazy to watch, but it works. And
Yeah.
it's like this like ignorance is bliss, just this unwavering belief in themselves of like, why not? And when you think about it, it there is no reason why not to do it. And you do figure it out. Sometimes it's money, you can get money. Sometimes
Yep.
it's resources. Like there's a million ways to do things, but I think I don't think you can just think that. I think you have to be around the right people and really learn for yourself that okay, this is how it's done, as opposed to just, you're not going to have that epiphany on your own. That's for sure.
Yeah. When, as you were saying that, the thing that came to my mind was there's a difference between good intentions and taking action. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like a lot of people are
100%.
well intentioned. I would love to be in shape. I would love to start my business. I mean, whatever it is. But until you take the action, like it doesn't matter how good your intentions are. Like
Relevant.
you've got to get the ball rolling. And it's hard, like you were talking about with the running, right? It's sustained uncomfortability for a period of time, but eventually it becomes more comfortable and you start getting into like, all right, I can do this. This is attainable. And you start moving into the next realm.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love it. Well, Todd, I want to be respectful of your time. Is there anything else or any other pivotal moments that you want to make sure we're highlighting in your story today?
Pivotal moment. I don't think so. It's been a pivotal couple of years. I
Yeah.
think that the biggest thing is like you said, you never know it's a pivotal moment. And two of the things that were the most pivotal for me, a lot of it would be taken negatively. So I think that it's so hard to keep a positive mindset when those things happen. But for the most part, there's something to be said about just showing up and keep moving, and it'll all work itself out one way or the other.
Absolutely. Well, brother, I appreciate your time sharing your story. And I know it's going to be helpful to so many, but excited to continue to watch your journey. And hey, 2 years from now, we'll have to have you back on and hear all the amazing things that you've done and where the business is at that point.
Sounds good, man. I really appreciate it. It was awesome.
Hey, thanks, brother.